So I'm 3 days away from being induced to have a vaginal delivery with my baby. And it's going to be baby number 2. It's a boy again. And I just never successfully recorded baby number 1's birth story. And it's quite a story. To summarize very quickly, it was 33 hours of labor in the hospital and 3 hours of pushing. And then I hemorrhaged real bad and it was quite intense. But a little backstory is that the baby was having intrauterine growth restriction. There was a few issues. It was a single umbilical artery, a marginal cord insertion. So he was growing slower in my stomach. And so I was having weekly appointments with my OBGYN. When I came in for my 37th week appointment, my blood pressure was really high, so they sent me to triage in the LED. And at the triage, they decided they were really short-staffed, so it was taking like 12 hours for them to go through all the testing with me, and then my blood pressure went back to normal. So they were like, okay, we're gonna let you go home and wait for the midwife to send you home, sign off on sending you home. And so we were waiting for an hour. It was like midnight at that point. And during that hour of waiting for the midwife, luckily she was delaying so much because I ended up having contractions for the first time during that pregnancy. I didn't have Braxton Hicks really. The doctor finally showed up instead of the midwife, and he's like, I'm here to sign you out. And I'm like, well, this past hour I've been having contractions like every 2 minutes. They feel very intense. Can you check my dilation? And within that hour, I dilated to 4 centimeters. So they admitted me, and I went into the labor and delivery unit. But it stalled out my labor, which was why it was taking like 33 hours in the end. And then they were putting in a resident doctor was putting in the epidural, and he put it in the wrong area because during his test run, instead of going and numbing my feet, it went up to my head. I started vomiting, hearing ringing noises, feeling dizzy, shaking. And he's like, oh, oops, I went and put it into the wrong area. Let me pull it out. So he was pulling it out. And then he tried again, and he's like, there's blood coming out. Let me get my attending. And at that point, I was like, you know what? We tried twice. If you need a third time, I maybe won't need the epidural after all. But I think in the end, the epidural hardly worked because I felt plenty of pain and during the whole labor. So anywho, they kept the epidural in because they're like, we think it's going to work. And I'm like, whatever, I don't need a third attempt on me. And I thought that was going to be the worst part of the labor, but that was the easiest part of the labor. They like overdosed me on the Pitocin, and my contractions weren't going down. They were staying up, and they didn't notice for like an hour. And then they finally had to dilute the Pitocin. When they noticed it, it was kind of a mess. But after the 33 hours of labor, it was 3 hours of pushing because the baby was right at the entrance, but he couldn't come out. He was too big. In the end, he was 6 pounds, 2 ounces. So I'm kind of nervous about this baby because this baby at 36 weeks was 6 pounds, 12 ounces. So already bigger than my first baby. And that's several weeks ago. So I'm like, what's going to happen this round of pushing? But anywho, after 3 hours of pushing, they opened up the episiotomy table, and I see a table full of like scalpels, and I was just like, oh no. So with like a lion's roar, I pushed out the baby, and he was placed on my chest, and it was the most beautiful moment in my life because after so many years of infertility, and it took 6 IVF rounds to get him. He was placed on my chest, and I finally had the baby. He finally arrived. But seconds later, I noticed he's not making noises. He's not crying. And I'm like, is he okay? Is he okay? And I see the nurses like frantically trying to make him cry, but the baby's not crying. And then she's like, yeah, his APGAR score is 4. I have to take him. He's not breathing. And because even though he was 37 weeks, he should be ready, the growth restriction had his lungs not quite fully developed. Anyways, stat NICU team runs into our room, takes the baby, and I tell my husband, go with the baby. And so he goes up to the NICU, and he sees them, sedate the baby, intubate the baby, put in, deal with all the tubes. And since they left, I had time to start registering about how am I doing. And I'm telling the doctors, I think I'm losing a lot of blood. And they're like, yes, you're hemorrhaging. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah. In the end, I ended up hemorrhaging 2,800 milliliters of blood. That's a crazy amount. Usually it's like 500, but I did almost 3,000 milliliters, almost 3 liters of blood, and a human body has like 5 liters total or something like that. So the last thing I remember is like, oh, her blood pressure is 80/40, and then I lose consciousness, and they have a stat team on me. They're hooking me up with extra like IVs. My veins are bad, so they were like trying to find them. And then they needed the IV team to run in to hook me up or put in more IVs. And they gave me several blood transfusions. And while they were doing that to me, a nurse runs to the NICU to get my husband and says, hey, go to your wife. And he's like, my wife said to be with the baby. And they're like, well, she might not make it. You have to go and see your wife. So he comes, after seeing his baby full of tubes, he comes and I'm out of it, as white as the sheets, not moving. And poor guy, he's strong in stressful situations, but that was quite the situation. So luckily, baby came out of the NICU and he's just thriving. And then I ended up, recovering very well. I did a 7th IVF round with my last embryo to get the sibling. Here he is. And he's coming in 3 days if he doesn't come earlier, because I'm being induced for a vaginal delivery. And that's where I'm thinking, like, the doctors are like, you had third degree lacerations, you had hemorrhaging. It's optional to get a C-section, but it will be delayed versus a vaginal delivery. We can schedule you earlier. And I'm like, I can't wait any further. Let's do the vaginal delivery in 3 days. And so I'm a little nervous because this baby is much bigger. And I tore really badly with a much smaller baby. So hopefully it all works out. Before the second baby arrived, I wanted to make sure I record this story so that it was 21 months ago, so it's not fresh in my mind, but I think I got most of the details here. It was quite the intense story. And I was seriously considering a C-section, but because it's later, I'm ready to meet this baby. So yeah, this is going to be a Christmas baby. My first one was a birthday my birthday baby. It was right near my birthday. So they're just gifts after, a total of 8 years in fertility, 7 IVF rounds. I am so blessed to be a mother of 2 boys really soon. So that's the story.